Okay, welcome to Bios and Bookmarks, powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. I'm Anna Lucy Smith, and today I'm joined by critically acclaimed British novelist Alex Wheatle. Thank you for coming, Alex, all the way from London. We're in slightly different time zones, but we're making it work. We're probably just as overcast here and gloomy with our weather today. But hopefully the rain holds up so you can hear me clearly and everybody doesn't hear a nice background noise of rain on galvanized roof. So Alex is from London, but born to Jamaican parents. He has written over a dozen novels now, both for adults and young adults. And his work has given voice to underserved and underrepresented communities in society. His latest novel, Cane Warriors, is no different in that he sheds light on a little known historical event, but a major one, a slave rebellion, Tacky's War in 1760 Jamaica. So we're going to talk about Cane Warriors some more today. Alex, your work has earned you an MBE in Services to Literature. You were awarded the 2016 Guardian Fiction Prize, Children's Fiction Prize. Yep, you've also been shortlisted for the YA Book Prize and the Carnegie Medal, and I'm sure there are other things in that list. We were just talking about how you're soon to be immortalized as well in the Small Axe mini-series that's going to show on BBC and Amazon Prime. So we can talk about that some more because I think we have a lot of audience who would be very interested in hearing about that series. But why don't you take us into a little bit about Cane Warriors as a novel, a little synopsis, and then you can read from it and we'll chat some more.
Okay, Cane Warriors, it's very interesting how that came about. In fact, in a way, I've come full circle, Anna, because almost 40 years ago, I was sitting in a prison cell. And my cellmate, a Rastafarian called Simeon, he actually handed me a copy of The Black Jacobins by the great Trinidad writer C.L.R. James. And of course, this is an account of the Haitian Revolution. So I always had that in my mind as I progressed to be a published writer. I wanted to write something similar to that, if possible. And I remember it was about 2-3 years ago, I was visiting my mother. She lives in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And usually when I visit her, I'm a storyteller, so I love to hear stories about her childhood when she was young and so forth. And she grew up in a little town called Richmond in the parish of St. Mary, near the north coast of Jamaica. And I'm not sure if she was aware, but that was quite adjacent to the plantations that Tacky led the revolt. And she remembered as a young girl that sometimes Tacky's name was mentioned. You know, the elders would speak of him in hushed terms and respect. And my mother wasn't quite sure who he was, but Google is your friend. So as soon as I got near a laptop, I typed in Tacky and up came this incredible story. And of course, this was, he led his revolt in 1760, 30 years before Toussaint Louverture in San Domingo, present-day Haiti. And I thought, wow, how comes this is not referenced much more in popular culture or even world history? I really think it should be. And I learned that they took over 2 plantations, killed everybody there, and then they marched to a British garrison called Fort Haldane on the north coast that overlooked the town of Port Maria. And then the British sent in reinforcements, and then there was a last stand. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, these guys are heroes, absolute heroes, as much as anybody else in world history. And I undertook my research about the history and Tacky and so on, and I learned that Tacky, some claim that he was an African prince from the Ghana region or the Akan region of Ghana. But as I delved into this research, I understood that even young boys of 11, 12, 13, 14 were required to do the back-breaking work or cane cutting, and indeed they were meted out the same punishment as they did to the men. And I just wondered, Anna, what that must have been like. It must have been terrifying, absolutely terrifying, that you could be killed for a case of disobedience. You know, you could be killed right on the spot. And I just imagine what it must be like waking up to that every morning, your life under threat every day of your being. And so that's why I decided to tell this from a 14-year-old perspective, Moa, and how he handles it. And the story starts with him being tapped on the shoulder in the dead of night, and he's been told that the rebellion is coming, and he's got to take part in it. And him and his best friend Keverton, who works in Canefields, he's given a task of killing the overseer. And I just tried to imagine what that must be like. You know, it's drama, isn't there? So much drama there. And
Yes.
so that was the skeleton of my story. And I just built on that template.
And you're going to read from, I think, a very action-packed section of that book as well, so we can get exactly into that action.
Yes, I am. This is the time when Keverton and Moa have finished their shift, and they're about to undertake their task of, trying to kill this overseer. And so I start there. I licked my wooden bowl clean. Keverton drained the last drop of his water. He stood up first. "Come, Moa," he said. "The sun's taking its dip." We dropped our bowls and mugs in the wooden box. Miss Gloria didn't meet our eyes. Fireflies hovered over her cooking pot. We collected our billhooks from the water tub. I sensed all eyes on me. I glanced up and down the dirt track. The western hills were now crowned with an amber glow. My heart pounded like old Mr. Cliff's hammer when he was fixing a large wheel. I shared a now or never look with Keverton. He nodded. The small creatures in the field had already started their nighttime arguments. I gripped the handle of my knife so tight that the redness appeared under my nails. Hamaya had stopped putting her handcart on the way to the millhouse and watched us. I felt her eyes burning into me. They would soon come for me, Moa. It might be tonight they would drag her out of her cabin. If she refused, they would take her anyway. I didn't want to fail her. My heart started to beat a warrior drum song. I prayed that the sky god Naomi would guide me. Pinckney stopped playing. "Say," I whispered to Keverton, "say the door bolted. Bolted or not bolted, we have to kick it down." And then Keverton dashed towards Mr. Donaldson's hut. I soon caught up. My heart could have run. It would have reached the cabin first. We both kicked the door down. Dust flew up in my eyes. I blinked furiously. Mr. Donaldson was taking his rest on his bed. He only wore his pants. His chest and feet were bare. His back ripper was on a table beside him next to an open Bible and a wooden cup. He shot up quickly, not quite believing that he was being confronted by two field slaves armed with billhooks. He went for his back ripper. Keverton hesitated. His weapon trembled in his right hand. I didn't want to see Keverton whipped again. I didn't want Mr. Massa to force me to view his broken body. I couldn't bear it to dig Keverton's pit. I didn't want to see him dangling from a thick branch. Fear left me. Naomi was with me. I charged towards my tormentor. The whip crack was loud. He caught me on the neck, and the pain was sharp and intense. It didn't stop me. Use both hands, Louis had advised. Dig deep, twist. Make sure he don't breathe another dirty breath. My aim was true, just above his left nipple. My blade went in easier than I had imagined it. I turned the blade. He didn't scream. He just let out this long, final breath. It was quite something, watching the last moments of a dying man. He'd never enjoy a mug of rum again. No slave would ever feel the sting of his back ripper. He'd never molest another Hamaya again. He'd never marvel once more at the red sun dipping beyond the western hills. I pulled my weapon out. He fell to the floor, as did the Bible. As I stood still, not believing what I had just done, Keverton leapt on Mr. Donaldson and plunged his billhook into his back 5 times. The wooden floor turned red, staining the book. Some tiny ants scarpered. Some got drowned in the blood. My heart thumped my ribcage. Keverton and I shared a look. We heard screams and cries from outside. I pulled back the white cloth from the window. People ran here and there. All was chaos. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alex. For those of you just joining us, that's Alex Wheatle reading from one of the pivotal scenes in Cane Warriors, his new young adult novel. So Alex, you've written at this point in your career, you've written for adults, you've written for stage as well. And you spoke about how you wanted to give personality to Moa, a 14-year-old boy, one of those who are so traumatized and brutalized by this institutionalized system of slavery and child labor. But did you have in mind a particular reader for this book? Because I would say, I mean, it's a quick and powerful read. It's action-packed. It's got simple storytelling. And, you know, we hear so often that teen boys don't read. And if anything was going to get them to read, it would be something like this. I mean, it seems so perfect for that age group. It seems almost written with that reader in mind. Is that the case?
Absolutely, that was the case. I really wanted it to be accessible for teenagers, girls and boys,
right,
from 11 plus, because I'm not sure about the Caribbean or Trinidad particularly, but in the UK, boys at that age can be reluctant readers, especially if they cannot find anything that they can relate to. And at the same time, I wanted to bring something that was about their ancestry, about their history, and about what their ancestors had to do and had to achieve. I really wanted for them to engage with their history and learn about their history. So I was wondering, how do I do that? How can I make a story so gripping and tense, if you like, and also learning them about their culture at the same time. And so this is why Cane Warriors is not my usual length. I think it's something like 40,000 words instead of my usual 60, because I do want to reach those reluctant readers. I do want to engage them. And I want to excite them like I was excited when I was a young man, when I was 17, 18, 19. And somebody was, I'll tell his name, Simeon. He was an avid reader. Okay. That's who I met in my prison cell. And he basically saved me with offering me books like the one that I just mentioned, The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. Because at school, I was never really engaged with history. You know, I didn't want to hear about King Henry VIII and his 6 wives and what he did with them and how many survived or how many he killed. I didn't want to hear about Queen Elizabeth I, Spanish Armada, you know, and so I felt that living in the UK, my Caribbean history was denied to me. And so, you know, I really want to offer the next generation coming up that there is narratives out there that they could learn about and be invested in their Caribbean history. It's very important to me.
Yeah, and you've done that with this book. I mean, I'm echoing the voices that are already online when I say that the importance of this book cannot be overstated, because it is that gateway into learning and getting excited about history. And it's also a part of our history that's not well documented, that there is some room as well for creative license. What you've done here is a fictional retelling. You've chosen the perspective you want to tell it from. I mean, Tacky himself remains a fairly elusive character in this narrative. Was that distance from the only true historical figure or documented figure in this war deliberate for you in your writing?
Try to find actual facts and, you know, confirm those facts, but some are conflicting, and I could never capture him in any kind of a confirmed kind of telling of his narrative. And so that's why, in a way, he had to kind of remain a bit distant. I mean, I did learn, or, you know, it is suggested that he was some kind of African prince from the Ghanaian region, Akan, if you like. But, you know, I can never find any confirmation to confirm that, that belief. But I played it like that. You know, I used my artistic license that perhaps he was an African prince. But he's a very heroic figure. But I think the Kevertons and the Moas of this world, perhaps they're even more heroic because, you know, one day you're working in the field as a teenager and the next minute you're taking up arms to try and kill your master. For me, that takes a particular kind of heroism that should not be denied and should be, you know, should be told and related to the world.
Yeah, and even in the excerpt you read for us already, you know, it's that climax where Moa has reached the point where he's playing his role in this rebellion. He is killing the overseer, but there's a lot before that of him kind of coming to terms with the fact that that's what's required of him. The struggle with his relationship with his parents, his father, his mother, who are both present on the same plantation as him, the relationship with his friends, his peers, and then he idolizes Tacky. I mean, this is, yes, it's a 1760 historical narrative, but it also carries that traditional young adult story of the dynamic with parents, the relationship with friends, and coming to terms, a kind of coming of age story of this is his moment to act heroically and do what needs to be done, even if it leads to self-sacrifice, because we know that this isn't necessarily going to be a happy ending. It's a brutal experience. The book is fast, quick-paced. And what I really enjoyed, and you said you took some artistic license, which you have to with history like this that isn't documented. But Tacky is from the eyes of Mo. He idolizes Tacky, but also when Tacky is present on the page, we see a lot of the African tradition, religion, and language. You use words throughout the narrative that even have to be translated for Moa. What do you draw on for that, and how important was it for you to incorporate that African history as well into this Jamaican story?
For me, employing aspects of African history and culture and religion is very important, because sometimes you might read a narrative from the Caribbean, whether it's historical or not, and that is seen to be left out. But there's no doubt, whoever, the Africans who came to the Caribbean, they had already formed their belief systems. And they honored those belief systems whenever they could or whenever they were allowed to. So there's no doubt in those days, like in the 17th century, they would have remembered some of those traditions, some of those cultures, some of their gods that, were as valid as anybody else's religion. And so they paid attention to those gods and prayed to those gods. For me, that is quite natural. So it was very important that I inserted that, because in a way I'm honoring that their existence, their belief systems, and we should not forget that. People in the Caribbean, once they were taken from Africa, they didn't, they didn't turn Christian overnight or turn to any other religion overnight. They served their gods. They remembered their gods in their burying rituals, the way they prayed over food, the way they, they lived their lives, because I guess they would have believed that one day they'll be free of all this. And so they prayed to those gods for deliverance. Why wouldn't they? So it was part of their daily life. So I had to include that.
And of course, it's very important to the narrative and how it plays out. The story plays out that religion, that belief system as well. And it's some of the most powerful imagery, I think, in the story. So it stood out to me as so important and so beautifully written, tying in that link to the heritage in this horrible situation. Of course, I mean, there really isn't a silver lining at all in this experience other than religion and faith. That belief of something greater is what gets anybody through that kind of situation. It's so crucial to the story. And it's a bit of a departure for you in terms of your writing, what you've been writing, because it's the first novel you've written that's set entirely in the Caribbean, isn't it? The first one that's set.
Not quite.
Is it? No? Okay.
Not quite, Anna.
Tell me about that. So because you've had characters come back and forth between London and Jamaica. You've always built Jamaica into your narrative, I think. But this one feels different in the sense that the language is very different as well. How was that process? How was that process for you? Or does it not actually feel different for you? Is it just another part of your writing process?
As I said, I think this story was burning, raging at the back of my head for a long while, because I always reference the Black Jacobins and what happened in Haiti in 1791. And so it's always something that I wanted to go back to if I possibly could. And with Cane Warriors, it was an ideal time. And to be honest, I think I mentioned earlier, I was thinking that the narrative should come from Tacky's mouth. But not only CLR James and Black Jacobins, but reggae music as well. I mean, I grew up on reggae music, especially in my teens. And people like national heroes, Jamaican heroes like Paul Bogle were always referenced in Bob Marley songs, or Sam Sharp and others. And so I heard about those incredible people, but not so much about Tacky. I thought, what has been written about Tacky? And I felt that for quite a long while now. So now I, decided to take that responsibility. And, because Chinua Achebe, that great
Yes.
Nigerian writer, once said that it's only the hunter who gets to tell the tale of the hunt, not the lion. And we need to own our stories. We need to own our histories, and we need to bring our perspectives to it rather than allow others to write it for us. And that was one of the main motivations of writing Cane Warriors. For example, about Jamaica and the slave abolishment and so forth is always or usually written by white establishment figures, and they try to honor the people like Wilberforce and so forth and say what they did rather than try to tell the slave narrative. To shy away from that. So it's almost like the people like Moa and Keverton and Tacky are not important in this discussion. It's only those who voted in Parliament in 1833 to stop slavery. But what is not said is that those slavers were given £20 million in 1833. And that's an astronomical figure that the British taxpayer only paid off in 2015. So we need to own our stories and histories and our heritage. We need to own it and relate to ourselves.
And you talk about that a bit in your author's note as well. You lend your voice to the call for reparations,
Yeah.
you talk about the emotional journey of writing this book, that it's, that a lot of it is cathartic, but then also it raises up those feelings of how unsatisfying the end of slavery was, the abolition of slavery, that process. And you quote Bob Marley's line in your author's note from Concrete Jungle, "No chains around my feet, but I'm not free."
Yeah.
I mean, can you share with us a little bit why that line resonates with you still, and whether the process of writing this book is, a step towards freeing you from that feeling?
Well, that line resonates to me personally. I mean, the way, my experience life living in Brixton as a young man, for most of my childhood, I spent my time in care in a children's home where
Yes.
I was abused in many ways. And then once I left there, I was abused yet again by the police and harassed and tormented by the police. And so Bob Marley's line, it means something to me every day of my being. No chains on my feet, but I'm still not free. I really felt that and lived that. Not only me, but the black people around me. And when I go to Jamaica and I see the poverty and I see people destitute, I go to downtown Kingston, people have nothing. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, slavery was abolished so long ago. And yet here we are still struggling. And not just in the Caribbean. I go to the United States of America and there's people there just as destitute. And this is supposed to be the richest nation on earth. And yet here they are, black people usually, and they're really struggling. They're going hungry. So there's no chains on their feet, but they're still not financially free or economically free. And so I think this year has taught us, with the Black Lives Matter movement. And now I'm thinking, okay, what is the next step now? Do we just get angry and toss statues into bays and harbors? Or do we try to collectively improve our existence in terms of reclaiming our stories, reclaiming our heritage, and maybe trying as a collective to improve us financially, not just in pockets like in the Caribbean or the black diaspora in London, but as a collective, as a unit, who we, we're working with each other collectively, where we don't see no national borders. I think that could be the next movement for us, and I think that could be very beneficial. I guess I'm going back to what Marcus Garvey wanted to try and achieve, and I really think we should go back to that and learn from that.
And this conversation crosses over from your writing work into your activism. You have a long history of working in revolution or being a voice and using your writing as a voice for, for the underserved and to champion a cause. Do you find that this year being a pandemic year, also being such a year of powerful activism, has it been hopeful for you or more overwhelming? Like, do you see that do you feel that that the momentum is moving in the right direction then, and that the art as well, books and the type of things that we're seeing coming out in the creative industries? I mean, we talked about the Small Acts mini-series as well that you've been a part of. Do these things give you hope of what's coming? And do you see more of the type of work that you've always been doing, the writing you've always been doing? Are you seeing it going a little more mainstream, and does that feel good? Or do you question the motives at any point behind these, the agendas behind this drive towards diversifying the, the film, the book industry, all of that? Where do you stand on it?
Anna, to be honest, in the first initial months of this pandemic, February, March, April, May, I was in despair, especially as this pandemic seemed to be hitting people of color in a very significant way. I was in despair, but then the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd, I mean, really it should not have been sparked by such a horrible public death. But in saying that, when I see people marching all over the world, and they were of all shades, white, black, anything in between, they're all marching. And that gives me hope, because that's the young generation, below me, saying to the world, we don't want to live under this anymore. We want parity. We want equality. That fills my heart a lot with encouragement and hope for the future. It really does. So even though some people might say, well, Trump still got 70 odd million votes or whatever, I'm thinking, but look at how many people voted against him. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to make the positive.
Have to think positive. Yes.
Yeah,
it's the only way we're going to get through this. Yeah, we still have a month to go.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm encouraged by that. I'm really encouraged by the US election, what occurred there, how many black people voted and took ownership of that and enacted on that. And so the good is coming. The good is coming, and equality is coming. I just think sometimes that many white people, who voted for Trump, for example, they seem to be afraid of equality. They might perceive it as them coming off lesser if equality is achieved. And so I think there's a great fear there. They think, oh my God, will my livelihood go down, or will I be worth as much as I was now, and compared to the future? But it's coming. I believe it's coming, and young people are demanding it, and they won't settle for anything less. And also during the summer, we had books for the first time, fiction and non-fiction, in the US bestsellers list, dominated by Black writers. So at last, they seem to be really engaging with what we have to say now. They started to listen to us, which is incredible, really, because for so many years, we have contributed incredibly to popular culture. But sometimes, a white demographic might just enjoy it, take it, dance to it, but they don't really study it or see our struggle or see our pain. But for the first time, I'm witnessing, now they're actually sitting down and they're studying and they're reading and they're thinking, wow, Black people go through all this? Yes, we do. And so I do feel there's a change coming.
Yeah. And, I think part of what you said, they actually echoed a bit of the narrative in Cane Warriors, because you have that Moa facing off against his father, who doesn't want him to take part in this rebellion, who's afraid for Moa's life, afraid for all of their lives, and wants to just toe the line. He says, why are you doing this? Look at what we're already living through. Like, don't do this. You're your mother's only son. Don't do this, kind of thing. And there's that sense too that, that it's such a huge risk, that there is always going to be fear. And so much of what you've just said there is played out in the narrative of the book as well, in a way that is, as you say, accessible for young people to understand the issues that are at hand, like the big choices you make when you take part in a massive rebellion or in activism on that scale. I wonder if you could read another part from the book for us, another short excerpt, and so we can get another sense of it.
Okay, this is an extract where Tacky and his warriors, they've raided and sacked the fort. And Moa and Keverton, they've been given the responsibility of being lookouts at the fort that looks over the sea and the harbour below and so on. But Tacky wants to take his warriors to the cave because that has very mystical and mystical value to him and spiritual value as well. And so this is when Tacky leads his followers to the caves by the sea. We headed west through a field of wild grass before hacking our way through tangled bushes and bramble. For a good while, we trekked inland, but eventually our course bent right towards the sea again. My shoulder wound throbbed once more. My blisters reopened. The land descended steadily. The undergrowth was damp and matted, and the air was thick. We soon approached a brook. Its trickling waters gave life to long thin reeds and arching skinny trees with wide leaves that blocked the sunlight. The mud banks were smooth and slippery. Tiny insects buzzed and crawled around the tree roots. Mosquitoes bred in damp mud patches and still waters. Birds, showing off their bright colours and long tails, sang above us. Small green lizards hopped here and there. Brothers hummed an Akan song that I remembered my mama singing to me when I was small. No worry, children. Slave master have no God friend. You always dropped to your bed. You're back broke again. But no worry, children. Slave master have no God friend. Our ancestors survived the long blue. They watched our small picnic grow true. Still breathing after blistered pirates plant upon cane field, where greedy iron eats ankle bone and back ripper make pearl black turn red. The are we still not dead. So no worry, children. Slave master have no God friend. Never forget our warrior Queen Nanny or the stories of Anansi, Naomi and Asad Yar will guide me good foot and bring me back to Mama Tree Root. So no worry, children. Slave master have no God friend. Suddenly, an opening appeared in the bush, and soft white sand was beneath my feet. The perfect blue sea stretched out to meet the sky, and I squinted as the full force of sunlight hit my face. We pulled off our shoes and stepped into the gentle, lapping waters. My blisters stung, but I was grateful for the cool sensation soothing my legs. I could have stayed there forever. For the next half hour or so, Tacky allowed us to relax, drink coconut milk and splash ourselves as he, Midgewood and Lewis resumed their debate on the beach. It was one of those rare times when I saw my brothers smiling. We talked about our dreamland where we would raise families and even more chickens and goats. I imagined sitting around a fire as an old man, telling my grandchildren and Nancy stories that I learned from Miss Pam. Midgewood called us in, and he led us westwards towards a grey-brown coloured rock formation that protruded out into the sea. It seemed strange to my eye, surrounded by so much rich green. We had to wade into the waters thigh high to reach a thin S-shaped opening into the caves. The occasional stone lying on the seabed bruised my blisters. Thick, green-brown weeds clung to the sea-washed rocks at its mouth, and a blue blackness hugged the inside walls. Underfoot, the sand was brown-yellow and cool to the touch. The air was fresher, and birds had made their nests in high corners. A long insect with pincers bigger than its head scuttled on the ground on business of its own. Other small hidden creatures screeched their strange screeches. The breath of the ocean was amplified inside, and when Tacky spoke, his voice seemed deeper, as if it came from somewhere far away. Maybe that's how they sound in Aquamaland. I imagine my ancestors watching me. Sit down, my brothers, Tacky said. We did what we were told and arranged ourselves in a circle. Keverton placed his hand on my shoulder. If you want to, he said, you can go back and enjoy the nice waters. This is not meant for your good ears. No, man, I replied. We want to hear what Tacky have to say. As before, Tacky approached each of us and studied our eyes. He regarded me longer than anyone else. I was glad he couldn't see my thumping heart. For a short moment, I thought he was about to instruct us to build a boat and set sail to the land of our mothers. Don't be foolish, Moa. The only one who know about building things with wood is old Mr. Cliff, and him talking to the ancestors right now. when Tacky stood on a rock at the back of the cave and looked down on us, we stood in a semicircle and gazed up at him. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alex. That's actually one of my my favorite scenes in the book. I'm glad you picked that one to read from. So we have a few comments on Facebook. One coming in from Marina, just echoing and chiming into what we were discussing. Culture is a powerful tool for messaging. I referenced the Hollywood studios telling the Jewish story in wonderful films that define the story of the Holy Land, and Bob Marley understood that power.
Yeah.
And a question for you, Alex, from Nicholas. Are there other lost or forgotten stories from Jamaican, Caribbean, or even Black British history that you think are especially in need of attention from contemporary fiction writers?
Yes, I think there were so many, especially from the Caribbean. I think it's really been untouched for so long. I know a friend of mine wants to do a nanny film. That would be incredible if they could achieve that. But there's so many. You know, we've been denied for so long for our culture, our stories, our narratives to be part of popular culture. And so, indeed, yes, there's so many. I mean, we have so many narratives that we could bring to the table. It's not just my narrative of living in Brixton,
right,
fighting with the police and so on. There's also the narrative of, say, somebody who works for the National Health Service, who came over to the UK maybe in the 50s or 60s, and their struggle and their family life and their life experience. You know, we have all kinds of narratives to bring and to retell. And it's about time that I really hope the Small Axe series will encourage not just the broadcasters, but people like, not just the national broadcasts, but people like Netflix and so on, and Amazon Prime indeed, to come and take a look at these narratives and them to believe that this is all part of the social fabric around the world, because these stories deserve to be told just as much as anywhere else. Why not? They're part of the world history, world stories. So, we should really be confident enough to step forward with our story, be proud of owning that.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Small Axe series? Because your episode is coming up.
Yeah.
It's going to premiere very soon. Tell us a little bit about the story that tells. I mean, it's directed, the Small Axe, the whole of the series is directed by Steve McQueen. So it's a big deal. It's giving, it's a big voice, big recognition. Tell us about your part in that, if any, other than being immortalized in character from your story and what it means to you.
About 4 or 5 years ago, my agent heard through the grapevine that Steve McQueen was preparing or developing a series of drama that would tell aspects of the West Indian kind of life, if you like, lived experiences in London from the late 1960s to the mid 1980s. And the first story he wanted to tell was that of Frank Critchlow, who used to own a restaurant in West London. And Frank Critchlow came from Trinidad, so he brought with him that tradition of steel pan and food and so on. But for establishment that he wanted to own and run, the police harassed him no end. And so Steve wanted to tell of that struggle where Frank Critchlow ended up in the Old Bailey, threatened with 10 years in jail for rioting that he never did. And so it was a famous case in 1970. So Steve really wanted to kick this series off, telling that story. And I was part of the creative team, the writers' room, because he assembled 5 or 6 writers to meet in a room for about 3 months. And every day we would discuss themes and ideas and what we think is important to showcase to the world, if you like. And halfway through this process, Steve wanted a narrative of a young Black boy who had experience in institutions, in maybe prison and so forth, or children's home. And one of my fellow writers pointed at me and said, Alex, you grew up in a children's home, you spent time in prison, we should tell your story. And so Steve looked at me and he said, Alex, are you holding out on me? And so for the rest of that day, I related my story to the writer's room and who was in it. And everyone's jaw dropped to the ground. And Steve just nodded and said, we have to tell your story. So that's how it came about, because you know, as to be honest, I kind of hesitated because I quickly understood that some of my most traumatic, awkward moments will be on screen for the world to see. And that's a bit overwhelming. Well, it was for me at first, but now, of course, when I think about it, if I wanted to choose any director in the world to tell my story, it would probably be Steve McQueen. So
Yeah.
I feel very honored.
Yeah, as you should. And I think it's testament to your life's work so far, how you've always used your personal stories, as tragic or heartfelt or awful as they may be, to channel that into a greater story and get young people to recognize that there's light at the end of the tunnel. You've put, a career of writing behind that, and this is well deserved recognition for how your story can reflect other people's and actually change people's lives. So I'm looking forward to it. I told you earlier, I don't know that I can get Amazon Prime here, but I'm sure somebody can make it happen. We're going to make it work. We're going to get past all of those restricted viewers, not available in your country notifications popping up, and we're going to make it happen for sure. I know somebody's going to get it to happen. But we have a question on Facebook from Marina. Alex, how do you think the impetus of Black Lives Matter can continue, given, for example, the story of Stephen Lawrence, the young Caribbean man murdered in South London 2 or 3 decades ago? Have the gains receded? I'm not sure of the story she references, but maybe you might know more of the history.
Yes, Stephen Lawrence was a young man who was killed in a racist attack. I think it's over 20 years ago now. Yeah. And I feel what Black Lives Matter does is emphasize our struggle, emphasize our pain, and in a way force people to look at how we've been struggling for so long, how we've been disadvantaged for so long. And it's coming to a position now where main society cannot just look the other way now. Because for many, many years, we've been campaigning about these incidents, not just about Steve Lawrence, young Black people who have died in police custody and no police officer has ever been charged or made to go to prison for these crimes. And I think now, especially with what happened with George Floyd, now we're demanding justice. And now, where society looked away and said, oh, nothing to do with me, this is not my fault, now they have to address this now. There's no running away, there's no kind of sweeping it under the carpet. And I think it's young people who are demanding this. And Joe Biden's going to have to address it once he gains the presidency. And I think here you're going to have to deal with it. There's no running away. So that's what I expect to see now. And I hope that the young generation will take that forward and progress with it.
And are there any, we've talked a lot about the stories that haven't been told, that need to be told. From the canon of Caribbean literature, we've been cataloging the 100 Caribbean books that made us over the course of this year. The Bocas Lit Fest has been working on that project and getting people to say which books have influenced them, their lives. Are there any others? We've talked a lot about C.L.R. James and his work, which I would mention as well had a profound effect on me because, as you said, history is not widely taught here. And I studied history right through to A levels. And it wasn't until Form 6 A level class when that book was introduced as a textbook that it was the first time in 7 years of studying history that you saw an enslaved man given a personality, a character, and a storyline in the textbook. It was profound. It was a remarkable change from everything, as you said, the Wilberforce and the all of this that had been taught to us for 5 years previously, and then we were given this book that was like, wow, okay, this is it. This is the history that we should have been told for 5 years already now. So this book is remarkable and maybe stands alone in that way and of its time. Are there any other books, Caribbean books in particular, that you think have made their mark like that?
Well, we had Andrea Levy, who sadly passed away. She had written a book called The Long Song. She had written Small Island. And there's been other, there's too many for me to name. But I think for the future, and that's what I'm focusing on right now, what narratives need to be told. I mean, for example, my mother, on her father's side, she comes from Indian descent.
Okay.
And I believe, especially in Jamaica, I'm not sure about Trinidad, but especially Jamaica, that narrative has yet to be told in so much in fiction. Like, my children ask me, Dad, how did people from India actually arrive in the Caribbean? What do they do, and how did they survive? How did they this? What is their story? And I think that's the whole thing. That's a whole genre that could be explored and written about. And also the migration of Caribbean workers to Panama. In fact, that was something that I was researching for a book, but I couldn't get out to Panama at the time, due to work commitments and children and so forth. But it's something, hopefully, when I've got time, I'll return to, because people forget our contribution. The Caribbean contribution,
Yes.
It was the biggest engineering feat in the world to build the Panama Canal. And tens and thousands of Caribbean people died of yellow fever and so forth. And that's all forgotten. It's all forgotten. So we need to claim our history, tell it, and honor those who have come before us. So that's what I'm looking forward to, that these histories will be unearthed and they will be told vigorously, and they will be held up, and they will stand in any canon. That's what I'm excited about right now. And I think this is where the Black Lives Matter movement should empower us writers, historians, and so forth to go out and seek and search for these stories and lay them out there.
I hope it does. And I mean, on that note, I'll mention as well Olive Senior, another Jamaican author who's written her nonfiction tome. It's a fat book on the Panama Canal and the history of West Indian workers on that feat of engineering. And that was an OCM Bocas Prize winner a few years back, maybe 2016 or thereabouts. So that's a great book to look into for anybody interested in that history of West Indians working in the Panama Canal. We have a comment on Facebook from Khadija Ibrahim, who says it's good to see the Small Axe series on TV. It's a change, making time for Black British narrative on screen. So that's, I mean, people are chiming in, and I hope everybody looks for it. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, we've talked some heavy stuff here, Alex, and I'm going to end our conversation on a little more fun note. About our write it, read it, or avoid it question that we like to end with. And I'm going to ask you, would you write it, read it, or avoid a reggae music inspired version of C.L.R. James's The Black Jacobins? And how would you do it?
I'd write it, read it, and love it. I mean, what a notion. What an idea. What a concept.
Yep. It'll be fun, right? Let's put it out there. I know.
Yeah, I think that could match Hamilton.
I think so too.
It
could be better. Yes.
Yeah. Let's celebrate our culture and our history. Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
And what's next for you, Alex, then, for your own writing? Are you already working on something new?
Yes, I am. I'm working a narrative. This time, a young girl is the protagonist, and she goes off on adventures. It's a proper adventure story, because sometimes popular culture like Pirates of the Caribbean and so on, Black women are kind of left out of that narrative. So I want to put them right center front of stage, and there will be the, my character is going to kick ass and go on voyages, go around the Caribbean and be a fantastic, go on fantastic adventures. Again, it's for young adults, but I really want to see young Black women and have adventures and have a mighty sword, and they might meet the likes of Captain Morgan and so on.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's good. Yes.
That's what I want to bring to that, yeah.
Because I'd say the only complaint maybe that I would have about Cane Warriors is that the girls are left on the sidelines. They're there in spirit, and certainly the Cane Warriors are fighting for their benefit, and they're very present in the novel, but they're not. Oh, well, there we go. Right. So all my questions have been answered.
They get to kick ass, trust me.
Good. Okay, so that's what we're looking forward to. We're going to talk about that one sometime next year, probably in Bios and Bookmarks, if not another time.
Yes, if you guys invite me to Trinidad again, I'll be happy to read from it.
Okay, we made a note of it. We will do that. What's the what year do you think you're going to have that one coming out?
2022.
Okay, so we have a little
That one's
time to
coming up.
plan, a little
Yes,
time
we
for
do.
the COVID vaccine to kick in, for flights and travel to go back to normal with some nice cheap rates. And we're going to make it happen. Thank you so much for Alex for joining us, for chatting so candidly with us, taking time to be here. Cane Warriors is a fantastic book. It's available straight from its publishers, Akashic Press,
That's right.
Akashic Books in New York. Order it from your indie bookseller, your local bookshop if you can. It's also Anderson Press in the UK. So everybody go out and get your copy of Cane Warriors. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everybody, for listening and joining in to our conversation. Take care.
Thank you for having me, Anna. And I'd like to see you live in person.
Yep.
Someday.
Next time. Yes, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope not too far in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, goodbye.
Okay.
Take care.